Okay, just a forewarning, this is going to be a long one. Potentially the longest video I've ever made. So for quite a long time, I've had a lot of people kind of either hint at or directly say in no uncertain terms that my political beliefs and a lot of my opinions are considered to be either wild or far-fetched or bizarre, taboo, or, just extreme is another way to put it. So I figured I would finally just take the time and sit down and just try and hammer out a lot of my political beliefs and really just strong beliefs in general. I'm not gonna get into why I hate the Beatles or some shit like that. But we're gonna try and really iron this out so that I have a de facto, I don't know, core video to go back to and be like, hey, this is a good starting point if you need to kind of wrap your head around some of the things that I'm talking about. Which is not to say that people can't comprehend or understand my views or positions. It's just I'm gonna try and elaborate a little bit more than I could in a person-to-person, one-to-one setting. So that being said, I also need to make another disclaimer. I am a fairly open-minded individual, so my political beliefs shift and evolve over time. 4 or 5 years ago, I was a liberal, and now if you called me that, I'd spit. It would upset me. I'd understand that it's probably just a miscommunication or misunderstanding of the term, but it's gonna offend me all the same. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump into this. The pinnacle, operating core of my political beliefs, and really just my beliefs in general, is a absolute why am I losing my words here? An absolute pinnacle focus on autonomy and the personal choice and free will of human beings. To me, that is more important than anything else in all of humanity. Obviously, a lot of other things are important, like health and environment and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think the ability to choose and make your own decisions and have free reign of yourself is more important to me than anything else. So keep that in mind. That's going to be an underlying theme throughout all of my beliefs and opinions. But I'm gonna jump back and forth between a lot of these because a lot of these are gonna share very similar themes, I guess. So autonomy is going to be forefront on all of my opinions. Sorry, I just got a notification on my phone. It said recording would be stopped. I don't know. I guess I'll just keep rolling. Hopefully everything's fine. Yeah, anywho. Okay, so I'm going to try and just hammer these out I shouldn't try and do this quick, but I don't know. I don't know how much memory I have on my phone, so it's kind of a weird race. So, I don't believe in government. And when I say I don't believe in it, I don't mean I don't believe in it. I mean I don't revere it. I don't regard it. I don't want it to be there. I think it's a bad thing, ultimately. And I think that where some good may have come from it, it was a side effect. It was unintentional. or it was intentional, but it was to steer people away, or to I don't know, the fucking word for making people feel good so that they don't bother you anymore. Placate. Placate. It is placation that they give us little crumbs to make us feel better, when ultimately we are still being abused and oppressed, and we are suffering. And it doesn't matter what government you go to. Some are obviously worse than others, and that's just going to be that. There's always going to be tiers of bad and tiers of good, no matter what you're discussing. So when it comes to government, yeah, you're going to have tiers. You're going to have tiers of bad and tiers of good. None of them are ultimately good. None of them. Not one form of government is wholly good with no downsides. And the downsides are always going to take away from the autonomy of the citizens of that society. Ultimately, I believe in anarchy. I believe that people should have free reign to govern themselves, and that communities should be run as they naturally would without the rule of law in place. You might say, what does that look like? And I would refer to, what the fuck is his name? I forget. He's over at Non-Compete. I forget what the guy's name is, but I only recently just discovered him. He has a series where he outlines what an anarchist society might look at. He's mostly referring to an anarcho-communist society, which I'm cool with. It's a good step, I see, but I see ultimately an anarchist society should actually get rid of the communist part too. But we are a long ways off from that, and that's another thing I need to stress when I talk about my opinions on governance, is that you cannot just switch from one form of government to another. You have to have transitional states. If we wanted to switch to communism in America right now, we would have to start by switching to socialism. We already have a lot of socialist policies in place in America throughout our government. And switching over to socialism wouldn't be hard. In fact, there's very little left of our democracy that wouldn't just be able to be changed almost overnight. Socialism is the closest operating governance that we have right now. That we could have, rather. We basically use socialism right now, and we just mask it by saying it's other things. But I won't get into that. That's my rancor for America is an entire other topic, but I'm gonna have to touch on it a lot here because I am an American citizen. So then that brings about the concept of economy. If there's no governance, then how do finances work? How do roads get built? All that jazz, you might wonder. I think in an ideal society, utopian society, ultimately people take care of themselves. People take care of each other. So if a road needs built, people decide, like, hey, how bad do we need that road built? How many people want to help build it? If enough people want something, they do it. They take care of it. They get it done. Obviously, one person can't, have enough power and free will to, get things done unless they really fucking believe in themselves and they have a lot of resources. But more often than not, if, one person wanted to go rogue and do something, and it doesn't hurt anyone else, they could still do it in an anarchocratic society. And that's important because that goes back to autonomy, if one wild guy got a hair up his ass and wanted to literally carve a whole fucking section through a mountain so that he could have a faster route to a family member that was otherwise 2 hours away or something like that. Cut the trip in half or something. You know, like, I mean, maybe he's never going to do it in his lifetime and he's just going to be carving through with a spoon or some shit like that. But the important thing is that he's allowed to do it. If it goes against someone else's autonomy, like maybe they live on that mountain or they have livestock on that mountain or something like that, then it becomes a problem and they can discuss it amongst themselves. Potentially, maybe the person with the livestock can find an alternative for them. But the thing is these person-to-person engagements don't happen as is right now when we have the rule of law, because the rule of law removes the need for people to interact with each other and discuss these matters amongst each other. So I think an autocratic society is going to definitely require people to be more social. And I think that's a good thing. I think people should be talking to each other, having discussions more, getting to know each other better. I think it's insane how much of our society, our values, our ethics, and whatnot claim to be about community, yet in a modern age, most of us don't even know our neighbors. I have three neighbors that live in the same apartment complex as me, and one that lives in a house right next to me. And the only one I know is the one that lives in the house, and that's because she is a conflicting political opponent. And I'm not saying I'm a politician, but, like, I won't get into that. But you kind of get what I mean, you know? Like, you could live in a city for 5-10 years, or even your whole life, and not know most of the people in there. If you didn't reach out to meet them, or get jobs, or have similar activities or groups or whatever, you know, you can just literally idly, like, pass right by these people and never even know they're there. Whereas I believe in my, you know, ideal utopian society, if you lived in a community, you would almost have to know every single person. Maybe not every single person, but at least most of the people within the community. Anyone who participates in the community, you would know them within the community. Just by virtue of interaction, you know, their needs and concerns would come up, and you would observe their needs and concerns because you would be a participating member of the community. And you would have to be, because everyone's integral. That goes kind of into the, like, labor aspect of an ideal society, in that I don't think that people should be doing work that doesn't matter. I think that commodity culture has only sprung up through capitalism as a way to force people to have more jobs, basically. You know, like, we buy shit we don't really need because we want to impress people we don't really know, and there's a fucking... That's probably a fucking Fight Club quote. I can actually see it, like the poster in my head. But I mean, it's true. It really is true, unfortunately, that a lot of us just buy shit we don't need when we have extra funds. And even when we're in survival mode, a lot of the times we're still buying maybe not the most ideal things, you know? Like, if you're poor and you don't have time to cook, or you don't have energy to cook, or you're too depressed to cook, you still probably buy fast food. And is that the best thing for you? Absolutely not. Is it the most efficient thing? Is it the most valuable, like, thing? Best value, bang for your buck kind of thing? Probably not. But it's easy, it's cheap, and it's within your reach, within your access. So yeah, basically that kind of covers that, but I'm all over the place with this one, and it's gonna be all over the place with this one. I'm kind of just using a little, like, note that I wrote to, like, keep me focused on certain topics. In regards to race, and ethnicity, I'm not gonna go so far as to say I'm, like, one of those people that, like, doesn't observe race or doesn't observe ethnicities, because I think race, ethnicity is important. It's integral to culture. And I think culture is important. But I also think culture kind of stems from your country and your nationalism. However, culture is something that is existent and observable. Like, where a nation may just be like a country with an invisible line for a border, your culture is observable. You know, you can tell that, like, Asian individuals have different physical traits. You can tell that African individuals have different physical traits. You can tell that a European individual has different physical traits. And I mean, obviously, all human beings have different physical traits. But it goes further than that, because there's regional influences. You know, whether you're closer or further away from the equator, whether you have to deal with high visibility like snow, or low visibility like darkness from, like, I don't know, like caves or trees or canopies and whatnot. There's a lot of things that come into play. And it's important, I think, to preserve those things, because they are unique and they do matter. And they only matter necessarily because it's kind of just a pride thing for the most part. But it gives people a sense of identity. And when people can observe that other individuals share the similar traits, they feel more comfortable. They feel more, like, familial almost. Like, you know, I may not know you, but you're similar to me, and so you have similar experiences, similar, you know what I mean. So I think it's important to preserve some aspect of that when it comes to race and ethnicity. I don't think race and ethnicity should be something that's just completely, I don't know, like, eliminated within society, you know, to the point where we don't observe it at all, and we just say, oh, I don't see color, and I just pretend that, like, no, I don't think that's the way to go. But I also don't think that people should be mistreated or judged or treated unfairly because of whatever skin color or physical traits they have. I will kind of hit on something that is definitely what a lot of people would consider a vice of mine, I guess. Not a vice. A negative trait, a toxic trait of mine, which is that I am what most people would consider to be ableist. There's no gentle way to put this. I don't believe that if someone with genetic defects can be prevented, then I believe steps should be taken to prevent those genetic defects. And I want to be clear that I don't think that it's like a slippery slope to eugenics or something like that, because I don't think that genetic defects could be qualified as, like, or could be categorized as something like dark skin, or like smaller eyes, or like even something as simple as, like, okay, I have a lazy eye. It's probably pretty apparent by this point. I don't think that's enough of a genetic defect to warrant axing a potential human before they have incubated long enough to become a genetic human. But that being said, I think at a certain point you have to know where to draw the line, and I think it is important to draw a line. I don't think that in our current society right now, it's a very unpopular opinion to want to terminate a pregnancy. No matter what stage it's in, it's an unpopular opinion. However, it becomes an extremely unpopular opinion when the termination is stemming from not wanting to have a genetically defective baby. But that's kind of where I stand. I think that I don't think it should be mandatory. I want to make that clear too. I don't think anyone should ever feel like they have to have an abortion or to terminate a pregnancy. However, I think we should put a societal encouragement on doing so, with the understanding that having that baby is going to put a dampen on that individual who has to raise that baby and the society around that baby, the community around that baby. Because there is going to be an individual who is going to be special needs and is going to require a lot more care and a lot more resources. And maybe that's for the best in a society. Maybe those kind of people help us stay humble and help us really reflect on the fragility of our genetic makeup. So maybe they're necessary. I don't know. I couldn't comment on that. I'm not a geneticist. I'm not. I'm in no way a professional on any matter, really. I'm just a dude who has some strong opinions, and that's really all this video is about. So, I'm ableist. That's kind of where that lands, and that's the most I'm going to talk about. I feel like I probably should talk more about that, but if you need to confront me about it, feel free. It's probably not something I'm going to shift my opinion too much about, because I have strong reasons for holding these beliefs. And they're not just personal biases. Anywho, going back to kind of the race topic, we're going to switch over to gender. I'm just going to say it flat. Gender is a spectrum. I argue with tons of people in my life about this. And even with my wife, who is probably the most closest person I have in my life. So it's kind of it's a really sore spot to have someone so close to me that doesn't feel the same way I do about this. But sex and gender and sex are both a spectrum. We kind of like roll the dice every time, a human being is born on where they land in those regards. You might have a penis, you might have a vagina, you might have a little both, you might have less of both. You might have, you might be femme present, you might be masculine present, you might be somewhere in between, you might be, somewhere on a spectrum where it makes it seem like both, or so, you can land anywhere. It's totally random. Most people obviously fall one way or the other, but it's not binary. It's not on a line. It's a spectrum. It's like colors. We have so many colors that we can observe, but we know that there's more because there's other creatures that can observe more. A mantis shrimp can observe more colors than we can. I think it's like 24 more colors than we can. And that's just tip of the iceberg kind of shit. So just because you don't understand or you can't wrap your head around it doesn't mean it's not there. And basically the thing to take away from that is that it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in the sense of like prejudice and bias, because no one should be prejudiced or biased against someone for their sex or their gender. But as far as like the operative, usefulness or practicality of a certain gender or whatever, or the traits that come with it, that's not important. It's really not. I fully believe that any human being is capable of the same things as any other human being, regardless of their sex or gender. It's mostly just a matter of how they want to do something and why they want to do something and their commitment to doing something. Obviously, genetically, we are, predisposed to certain advantages and disadvantages, and that's just the nature of life. But yeah, that's kind of just how that works. Obviously, you can alter a lot of that as much as you want, once you're alive. And you could even alter it before you're alive, but that's not really moral, I guess. I don't know. Maybe someday we'll get to a point where we're genetically modifying people, but again, that's a slippery slope to genetics. That's why I have to be really careful when I'm talking about, my ableism, because I don't mean any ill intent with my ableism. Like, I'm not like, I guess I don't have any malice towards existing specially abled people. I have malice towards people that enable more to occur. I don't think that in the year 2020, with all of our advancements in technology and medicine, that we should still be not permitting, but I don't know. We should strongly discourage the birth of genetically defective individuals. And especially when we know that they are going to be genetically defective. If we don't know and they just are born that way, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you should be able to do. You shouldn't be able to, terminate someone after the fact. I don't believe in that. I absolutely do not believe in that. To terminate someone after the fact because you realize, like, oh, they came out wrong. That's totally different matter. So going into law, fuck it, basically, is my opinion. I think mostly law is just an arm of the government that unfairly treats lower classes as criminals before they've ever done anything. It's basically just to keep the people in line and prevent people from organizing against their government. So, law, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't do anything for people. If it does, it's by complete accident. It's coincidence. The only reason that they make something like rape illegal is because on the off chance that someone of the upper crust is raped, they want to be able to prosecute them legally and take care of that matter in the public eye. That's it. Because if someone of the lower class or working class is raped, it's shoved under the rug. The rapist will get maybe like 2 months, maybe 48 hours, depending on the county, whatever. In particularly like PC liberal areas, maybe they'll get 8 years or something like that. It's obnoxiously unfair how people are tried or how criminals are tried. In my opinion, I think that rape is probably the single worst crime that you could commit as a person. I know a lot of people are going to probably raise their eyebrows about that, but it goes back to my core of autonomy. When you rape someone, you are robbing them of their ability to consent to sexual intercourse. And in my opinion, that means you're robbing them of their autonomy. And in my opinion, that is the single worst crime you can do. If you rob someone of their autonomy, their ability to choose, their ability to consent. And to simply use someone's body like that without their consent is, again, I said, of the highest crime. I have a friend, a close personal friend, that at one point had a heart condition and decided that she did not want to proceed with life-saving surgery. However, her family actually went behind her back and basically set her up for the surgery without her knowing. And they kind of just tricked her and put her through the procedure and had the procedure done. And she has a permanent reminder that her family robbed her of her autonomy right down her chest, a scar along her chest. And that is, in my mind, no different at all than to rape someone, to rob them of their autonomy. I hope I'm not speaking directly to her at this point, because I don't want to open up old wounds. It's the last thing I would ever want to do, especially to someone I care about so much. But if you are listening, I hope you understand that I'm on your side, and I hate that they did that to you. I would have hated to lose you, of course, but that's your autonomy, and your autonomy matters more than anything. God, my lazy eye is bad. Jesus. Like I'm getting disgusted looking at my own eye. God. Maybe I should have moved the camera so it's not facing, or I could just... Getting off topic. I'm already 30 minutes in. I haven't even covered half my topics. Fucking ridiculous. Violence. I am not an ANCAP. I am not a libertarian, and I do not believe in NAP, otherwise known as the non-aggression principle. I believe that if someone has harmed you, or if someone has harmed your family, or your property, or whatever, and you shouldn't have property, by the way, that's just another thing I'll get into, that you have full rights to seek vengeance. I think vengeance should be a more common concept in society. We obviously face reprisal for crimes that we commit by way of law. So it's no different, really. It's just someone else swinging the axe is the main thing. And I would rather that the person who is directly affected, the victim, be the one to cast the judgment, because they're the one that was affected. No one else should be involved. No one should be harming your rapist or harming your murderer for you, or your, murderer. You can't harm your murderer, obviously. But if someone steals from you, you should be the one to take your things back. If someone rapes you, you should be the one to fucking wring their neck. And maybe you can have people assist you. Maybe you can have people help you. People who believe in your cause. People who want to seek justice as well. But ultimately, it shouldn't be a bunch of dudes in fucking suits, capping some dude with a Glock or bringing him in to fucking rot behind a cell. And that's another thing is, I'm just going to jump real quick to imprisonment. I don't believe in imprisonment. I believe that any crime that has ever been committed can be solved with either rehabilitation or swift direct action. I don't think that you need to have someone fucking rot behind a cell. No one fucking learns anything or feels anything sitting in a fucking room just dying inside. Okay? And the victims or the families of the victims of the person that were affected by that person, they're not able to just watch that person and feel like, yeah, they got theirs. They're not gonna find peace. That's not closure, Either knowing that person is dead or knowing that person has been rehabilitated really should be the only two outcomes that actually bring people closure. If someone killed my brother tomorrow, someone just for no fucking reason or for whatever reason decided to just kill my brother tomorrow, I would not rest until either that person had been slain by my hand, or that person had realized the grave error and mistake that they had made and worked their ass off for the rest of their life to repent for it. And you're not going to do that in a prison cell. You are never going to pay back the victims and the family members of the victims that you have harmed by rotting in a cell. You're not helping anyone. All you're helping is the state. That's ultimately where it comes back to, is governance. The governments, in this case, the state, is using prison labor as slave labor, basically. They are taking the hurt and the pain felt by the victims and the families of the victims and using it as an emotional bargaining chip to hold these criminals hostage and force them to labor for the state, to extrude profit from them. So really, they're just using it as an excuse. They're using their crime as an excuse to turn them into a vessel of wealth, a vessel of labor. Just another reason why prisons don't need to exist. And then they take the taxpayer dollars to fund the feeding and housing and clothing of these individuals. No. It's a scam. It's a fucking con. And we all fall for it. We're all okay with it because, well, at least it puts the bad guys away. Does it? Does it really? Because no, it fucking doesn't. You know, I know child rapists who have gotten out in my lifetime. I'm only 28 years old. I mean, that's kind of old as far as most millennials are concerned. But for me to know someone who has committed rape against a child and gotten out for the crime of committed rape against a child in my lifetime is obscene to me. It should not happen. And you know what? That happened within half of my lifetime. A quarter even, actually. Yeah, like a decade, maybe. Yeah, a decade. It happened within the last decade. So, almost a third. Little more than a third of my life. Or a little less, sorry. Whatever. The law is not meant to benefit you as the individual, as the citizen. It's not meant to benefit you. It's meant to benefit people at the top, the people who own the companies, the people who own the land, the people who own the law. And people own the law. People can buy the law. The law can be bought. And it absolutely 100% is. That's what it exists for. It exists to be bought. It's a bargaining chip. It's a bribe. In its entirety. Moving on. Health. Pharmaceutical industry. Medical industry. Pharmaceuticals, health, medical should not be tied to industries. Should not be tied to profit. Should not be tied to governance. Shouldn't be tied to any of that shit. Okay? Keeping people alive and making sure that they're healthy is not something that has any business being tied to a dollar. Just isn't. So, there's that right there. Write that down. But because it is, and it is so deeply rooted to the dollar, at least in the United States, it's withheld from us. It's held hostage from us. The standard citizen in the United States is afraid to go to the doctor, is afraid to see that fucking bill from that fucking health checkup, is afraid to get a flu shot, is afraid of all kinds of different things that we should be glad to have in our century. You know, we talk a lot about how far we've come in the medical industry and how much longer people live because of the advancements in medicine and technology, but who has access to that? Because not many is really the answer. Not enough. It's obscene how many don't have access. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details of health, wellness, pharmaceutical, medical, all that stuff. But ultimately, it needs to be its own thing. It needs to be independent of governance and independent of the economy. How that happens, I'm not an expert. I don't know. But people who work as doctors, people who work as nurses shouldn't be doing it because they're being compensated financially. Well compensated financially. They still need to be compensated, obviously, and they should be compensated well. But I think that comes in the form of like social status rather than an actual like physical currency of some kind. And I'll kind of get into that more maybe now. Because I don't believe in economics and law and society and governance. I believe in society. I don't know why I said that. I don't think that we should ultimately have a currency. I think most of our trade negotiations should be happening over labor trades that we can make, or trading crafted goods, or trading social status, you know. And we do all of these things normally already currently in our society. We just do it with a dollar in between as a buffer. And I think a lot of people think that it speeds things up, but I kind of think it slows things down. Because if the only difference, if I was saying I want to promote your business if you give me this product, and they say, well, you can do that, but we need you to buy at least half of the product, or we need you to pay payments on the product, that's going to slow down the progress of me obtaining that product, reviewing that product, and then talking about that product and advertising that product. And obviously that's not like, that doesn't have to be like a super capitalist thing. Like, people are gonna like advertise products regardless of whether or not capitalism is involved. You know, if someone bakes the best pies in town, people are still going to talk about that being the best pies in town. It's like how supply and demand works. So I've already talked kind of about labor. I think everybody should basically be able to do whatever they want as far as labor. I think ultimately, in the core of every human, there's something you yearn to do. There's something that makes your heart sing. And ultimately, most people don't get a chance to do those things. Or if they do, it has to be as a like back burner hobby that they only get to enjoy every once in a while. You know, I know through messing around with stuff in my lifetime that I have an affinity for tinkering. I have an affinity for art, and I have affinity for acting and speaking and writing. I know I have affinities for these things, but I don't know if any of these things are the things that I am destined to do because capitalism forces me to put a price tag on them. You know, I think I'm fairly talented, I guess. I wouldn't say skilled, but I think I impress people every now and then. I guess just depending on the gauge of human that I'm talking to in the first place. But I do not believe in making any of my talents or my skills marketable. I don't believe in trying to make money off of them. I think that takes completely away from the heart of a lot of those things, and it takes away from the soul of a lot of those things. You know, a lot of people, you know, that live in a society, capitalist society, and grow up in a capitalist society, they don't have any problem doing that because that's just part of life, and they don't think about the repercussions of that. But I think trying to make your skills and your heart and your soul and the core of who you are into profit is like literally selling a part of yourself. And I'm not okay with that. I never have been, and I probably never will be. Even just laboring at the jobs that I have, I feel uncomfortable expressing myself or speaking my own mind or speaking my own heart because I'm giving a piece of myself away for a profit. And it feels wrong. It feels like I should only be expressing these things with sincerity to people who will consume them with sincerity. I think writers who write, they write for a certain audience. I think artists who make art for a certain audience. And I think that when you create something, you want it to be observed and consumed by a certain type of person, or certain type of people, and you want to gauge their reaction, and their reaction is your payment. When you write a funny joke and people laugh at it, or you say a funny joke and people laugh at it, because you don't always have to write a joke, that's your payment. That's your services rendered, payments rendered, whatever. It feels good. You get something back. When I make my gun videos on my YouTube channel,